The First Voyage Around the World by Magellan. The document reveals several insights not just in the character of the Philippines during pre-colonial period, but also on how the fresh eyes of the European regarded a deeply unfamiliar terrain, environment, people, and culture. The First Voyage Around the World by Magellan was published after Pigafetta returned to Italy. Antonio Pigafetta wrote his first-hand observation and general impression of the Far East, including their experiences in the Visayas. In Pigafetta's account, their fleet reached what he called the Landros Islands, or the Islands of the Thieves. Landros Islands, presently known as Marianas Islands. It is located south-southeast of Japan, west-southwest of Hawaii, north of New Guinea, and east of the Philippines. March 16, 1521, Pigafetta reported that they reached the Isle of Samal, now Samar, but Magellan decided to land in another uninhabited island for greater security where they could rest for a few days. After 2 days, March 18, 9 men came to them and showed joy and eagerness in seeing them and welcomed them with food, drinks, and gifts. They went to Humunu Island where they found the first sign of gold in the island. They named the island with the nearby islands as the archipelago of St. Lazarus. March 25, they saw 2 balangay. Balangay is a long boat full up in Masaba and Masua. The leader, King Rahasalgu, sent his men to the ship of Magellan. The king offered to give Magellan a large bar of gold and chest of ginger. Magellan declined. Instead, Magellan asked for money for the needs of his ships. The king responded by giving them the needed provisions and food in chainware. Magellan exchanged gifts of robes in Turkish, passions, red cap, knives, and mirrors. The 2 men expressed their desire to become brothers. Magellan also boasted of his men in an armor who could not strike with swords and daggers. The king was fascinated and remarked that men in such armor could be worth 100 of his men. Magellan showed other weapons, helmets, and artilleries. He also shared his charts and maps and how they found the islands. Magellan was introduced to the king's brother, who was also king of another island. They went to this island and they saw mines of gold. The gold was abundant that the parts of the ship and the house of the second king were made of gold. Rai Kalumbu, king of Sulan and Calagan, also known Butuan and Caragua. Pigafetta described him as the most handsome of all men that he saw in this place. He was adorned with silk and golden accessories like golden dagger, which he carried with him a wooden polished sheet. March 31, Easter Sunday. Magellan ordered the chaplain to preside a mass by the shore. The king sent 2 dead pigs and attend the mass with the other king, and said, when the offertory of the mass came, the 2 kings went to kiss the cross like us, but they offered nothing. And the day elevation of the body of our Lord, they were kneeling like us and adore our Lord with joy and hands. After the mass, Magellan ordered that the cross be brought with nails and crowned in place. Magellan explained that the cross, the nail, and the crown were the sign of his emperor, and that he was ordered to plant in it the places that he would reach, and the cross would be beneficial for their people, because once the Spaniards saw this cross, then they would know that they had been in this land and would not cause them troubles, and any person who might be held captives by them would be released. April 7, 1521. Magellan and his men reached the port of Cebu, the largest and the richest of the islands, with the help of Raya Calumbu. The king of Cebu, Raha Humabon, demanded that they pay tribute as it was customary, but Magellan refused. Magellan said that he was the captain himself and thus would not pay tribute to the other king. Magellan's interpreter explained to the king of Cebu that Magellan's king was the emperor of the great empire and that it would do them better to make friends with them than to forge enmity. The king consulted his council, and the next day, together with the other principal men of Cebu, they meet in an open space, and the king offered a bit of his blood, demanded that Magellan do the same. Magellan spoke about peace and God. People took pleasure in his speech. Magellan asked the people who would succeed the king after his reign, and the people responded that the eldest child of the king, who happened to be a daughter, would be the next in line. Parents were no longer taken into account, and his to follow the orders of their children as the new leaders of the land. People wished to become Christians through their free will and not because they were forced or intimidated. April 14. The people gathered with the king and other principal men of the island. Magellan spoke and encouraged the king to be a good Christian by burning all the idols and worship the cross instead. The king of Cebu was baptized as Christian. After 8 days, all of the islands inhabited were already baptized. Pigafetta admitted that they burned a village down for obeying neither the king nor Magellan. The mass was conducted by the shore every day. When the queen, Hara Amihan, came to the mass one day, Magellan gave her an image of an infant Jesus made by Pigafetta himself.
Ferdinand Magellan was born on February 3, 1480 and died April 25, 1521.
Antonio Pigafetta, born on 1480 at Vicesa, Italy, died on 1531 at the age of 40.
Antonio Pigafetta is an Italian scholar and explorer from Republic of Venice. He traveled with the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan and his crew by order of the King Charles I of Spain on their voyage around the world.
April 26. Sula, a principal man from the island of Mactan, also known as Mactan, went to see Magellan and asked him a boat full of men so that he could fight the chief named sila Lapu-Lapu, also known as Lapu-Lapu. According to Sula, Lapu-Lapu refused to obey the king and was also preventing him from doing so. Magellan offered 3 votes and went to Mactan himself to fight Lapu-Lapu. They arrived in Mactan in daylight, with 49 in numbers, while the islanders of Mactan were estimated to number 1,500. Magellan died in the battle. The native, perceiving that the bodies of the enemies were protected with armors, aimed for their legs instead. Magellan was pierced with a poisoned arrow in his right leg. A few of their men charged at the natives and tried to intimidate them by burning an entire village, but this only enraged the natives further. Magellan was specifically targeted because the native knew he was the captain general. Magellan was hit with a lance in the face. Magellan retaliated and pierced the same native with his lance in the breast and tried to draw his sword, but could not lift it because of his wounded arms. One native with a great sword delivered a blow in Magellan's left leg, brought him face down, and the natives ceaselessly attacked Magellan with lances, swords, and even their bare hands. The king of Cebu, who was baptized, could have sent help, but Magellan instructed him not to join the battle and stay in the barangay, so that he would see how they fought. The king offered the people of Mactan's gift of any value and amount in exchange of Magellan's body, but the chief refused. They wanted to keep Magellan's body as a monumento of their victory. Duarte Barbosa is elected as the new captain. Henry, Magellan's slave and interpreter, betrayed them and told the king of Cebu that they intended to leave as quickly as possible. The slave allegedly told the king that if he followed his advice, the king would acquire the ships and the goods of Magellan's fleet. The two conspired and betrayed what was left of Magellan's men. The king invited these men to a gathering where he said he would present jewels that he would send for the king of Spain. 34 men attended, while Pigafetta was not able to join because he was nursing his battle wounds. The natives had slain all the men except the interpreter and one Serrano who was already wounded. The fleet departed and abandoned Serrano. They left Cebu and continued their journey around the world. From the original 5 ships set to sail, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, Trinidad, and Santiago, all the Victoria returned to space. And from the original 237 men, only 18 men survived.
Ang bawat bantayog na gaya nito, paalala sa mga nangyari noong lumipas, kumakatawan sa mga tao at nangyaring dapat nating ikarangal.
The KKK and the Kartilya ng Katipunan. Despite the fact that anti-colonial movements, endeavors, and organizations had already been made centuries prior, the Katipunan or the Kataas-Taasan, Kagalang-galangang Katipunan ng mga Anak ng Bayan or KKK is perhaps the most significant organization founded in Philippine history. Prior uprisings like one of the most enduring revolts in the country led by the Ilocano, Diego Silang, who was only concerned about his beloved Ilocos, were carried out before the founding of the Katipunan. Nevertheless, only this organization envisioned Filipinos coming together in unity to revolt against the Spaniards for the country's independence. Local revolts before the Katipunan were carried out with aspirations devoid of an imagination for the entire nation, whereas the propaganda movement headed by the Ilustrados, Marcelo H. del Pilar, Graciano Lopez Haina, and Jose Rizal demanded only for equal rights, representation in the Spanish Cortes, and protection from the abuses of the Spanish friars. To guide the organization in its aspiration for a collective goal, the Katipunan defined a value system, Kartilya ng Katipunan. Originally, mga aral ng Katipunan ng mga anak ng bayan or lessons of the organization of the sons of the country became one of the most indispensable Katipunan documents. Emilio Jacinto, who was a law student at the Universidad de Santo Tomas, and who joined the Katipunan when he was only 18 years old, penned the Cartilla in 1896. Bonifacio acknowledged Jacinto's work and intellect despite his youth, and this was manifested when Bonifacio willingly favored the Cartilla's distribution to the Katipuneros, seeing that it was much better than the Decalogue that he had written. Regarded as the Katipunan's Code of Conduct, the Cartilla contains 14 rules that uphold specific values and teachings through which the Katipuneros should behave. These rules were categorized into two. The first involved guidelines to ensure that a Katipunero will be an upright individual, while the second covered standards on how to treat one's fellow men. The Katipunan Code of Conduct, mga aral ng katipunan ng mga anak ng bayan. Number 1. The life that is not consecrated to a lofty and reasonable purpose is a tree without a shade, if not a poisonous weed. Ang kabuhayang hindi ginugugol sa isang malaki at banal na kadahilanan ay kahoy na walang lilim, kundi damong makamandag. Number 2. To do good for personal gain and not for its own sake is not virtue. Ang gawang magaling na nagbubuhat sa pagpipita sa sarili at hindi sa talagang nasang gumawa ng kagalingan ay di kabaitan. Number 3. It is rational to be charitable and love one's fellow creature and to adjust one's conduct, acts, and words to what is in itself reasonable. Ang tunay na kabanalan ay ang pagkakawang gawa, ang pag-ibig sa kapwa, at ang isukat ang bawat kilos, gawat pangungusap sa talagang katwiran. Number 4. Whether our skin be black or white, we are all born equal. Superiority in knowledge, wealth, and beauty are to be understood, but not superiority by nature. Maitim man at maputi ang kulay ng balat, lahat ng tao ay magkakapantay. Mangyayaring ang isa'y higitan ng dunong, sa yaman, sa ganda, ngunit di mahihigitan sa pagkatao. Number 5. The honorable man prefers honor to personal gain, the scoundrel gain to honor. Ang may mataas na kalooban, inuuna ang puri sa pagpipita sa sarili. Ang may hamak na kalooban, inuuna ang pagpipita sa sarili sa puri. Number 6. To the honorable man, his work is sacred. Sa taong may hiya, salita'y panunumpa. Number 7. Do not waste thy time. Wealth can be recovered, but not time lost. Huwag mong sasayangin ang panahon. Ang yamang nawalay mangyayaring magbalik, ngunit panahong nagdaan ay di na muli pang magdadaan. Number 8. Defend the oppressed and fight the oppressor, before the law or in the field. Ipagtanggol mo ang inaapi at kabakahin ang umaapi. Number 9. The prudent man is sparing in words and faithful in keeping secrets. Ang taong matalino'y ang may pag-iingat sa bawat sasabihin at matutong ipaglihim ang dapat ipaglihim. Number 10. On the thorny path of life, man is the guide of woman and the children. And if the guide leads to the precipice, those whom he guides will also go there. Sa daang matinik ng kabuhayan, lalaki ay siyang patnugod ng asawa at mga anak. Kung ang umaakay ay tungo sa masama, ang patutunguhan ng iaakay ay kasamaan din. Number 11. Thou must not look upon woman as a mere plaything, but a faithful companion who will share with thee the penalties of life. Her physical weakness will increase thy interest in her, and she will remind thee of the mother who bore thee and reared thee. Ang babae ay huwag mong tignang isang bagay na libangan lamang, kundi isang katuwang at karamay sa mga kahirapan nitong kabuhayan. Gamitan mo ng buong pagpipitagan ang kanyang kahinaan at alalahanin ang inang pinagbuhat at nagiwi sa iyong kasangunan. Number 12. What thou dost not desire, done unto thy wife, children, brothers, and sisters that do not unto the wife, children, brothers, and sisters of thy neighbor. Ang di mo ibig na gawin sa asawa mo, anak at kapatid, ay huwag mong gawin sa asawa, anak at kapatid ng iba. Number 13. Man is not worth more because he is a king, because his nose is aquiline and his color white, not because he is a priest, a servant of God, nor because of the high prerogative that he enjoys upon earth, but he is worth most who is a man of proven and real value, who does good, keep his word, is worthy and honest. He who does not oppress nor consent to being oppressed, he who loves and cherishes his fatherland, though he be born in the wilderness and know no tongue but his own. Ang kamahalan ng tao ay wala sa pagkahari, wala sa tangos ng ilong at puti ng muka, wala sa pagkaparing kahalili ng Diyos, wala sa mataas na kalagayan sa balat ng lupa, wagas at tunay na mahal na tao, kahit laking gubat at walang nababatid, kundi ang sariling wika, yaong may magandang asal, may isang pangungusap, may dangal at puri, yaong di napapaapit, di nakikiapi, yaong marunong magdamdam at marunong lumingap sa bayang tinubuan. Number 14. When these rules of conduct shall be known to all, the longed-for sun of liberty shall rise brilliant over this most unhappy portion of the globe, and its rays shall diffuse everlasting joy among the confederated brethren of the same race. The lives of those who have gone before, the fatigues and the well-paid sufferings will remain. If he who desires to enter the katipunan has informed himself to all this and believes, he will be able to perform what will be his duties. He may fill out the application for admission. Paglaganap ng mga aral na ito at maningning na sumikat ang araw ng mahal na kalayaan dito sa kaaba-abang sangkalupaan at sa bugan ng matamis ng liwanag ang nagkaisang magkalahit, magkakapatid ng ligaya ng walang katapusan, ang mga ginugol na buhay, pagod, at mga tiniis na kahirapay labis ng natumbasan. Kung lahat ng ito'y matarok na ng iibig, pumasok at inaakala niyang matutupad ang mga tutungkulin, maitatala ang kanyang dinanasa sa kasunod nito. Understanding the Katipunan's values, ideals, aspirations, and ideology entails a thorough grasp of the organization's primary governing document.
Bago pa dumating ang mga dayuhan, tayo'y may sariling dunong at paninindigan. Ngayon ito'y tinupok ng kawalang kasarinlan. Tayo ay binubulag, nilulumpot, pinapaslang. Ngunit sa hinaharap, maaabot ang pangarap. Itong layang mailap ay ating makakamtan. Ngingiti ang araw, luha ay mapaparang, panikala'y mapapati, ligaya siya nitong hatid. Pilipinas kong mahal, ina kong minamahal.
Mga anak mo'y nagbabangon, hahamunin ang panahon.
Reading the Proclamation of the Philippine Independence. The most significant of Emilio Aguinaldo's dictatorial government was the proclamation of Philippine independence from Spain in Kawit, Cavite on June 12, 1898. The day was declared a national holiday. The ceremony was solemnly held at the balcony of General Emilio Aguinaldo's residence. A dramatic feature of the ceremony was the formal unfurling of the Filipino flag. The Philippine national anthem was played by the San Francisco de Malabon Band. Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista solemnly read the act of the Declaration of Philippine Independence, which he himself wrote with 98 persons signing the declaration. Proclamation of the Independence of the Philippines by Jose P. Laurel. Love of freedom has always been the dominating impulse which has given the historical evolution of the Filipino race a meaning and a purpose. In war and in peace, the Filipinos have ceaselessly fought and labored for their freedom ever since they were brought under foreign yoke. First under Spain for 300 or more years, and later under America for the last 40 years. Their incessant and arduous quest for liberation has been hallowed by the blood and suffering of countless Filipinos. As a consequence of the Greater East Asia War, the great Nipponese Empire, true to its altruistic mission in waging that war, has enabled the Filipino people to realize at last their dream of freedom by allowing them to form a preparatory commission for Philippine independence, to adopt a constitution for an independent Philippines, and to take all other requisite steps to the establishment of the Philippine Republic. The Filipino people value their independence as the blessed fruit of the sacrifices of their heroic forefathers and brothers, who fought and died in far-flung battlefields from Mactan to Bataan in their persistent struggle for freedom. They glory in it as the fulfillment of the will of the divine providence, which has given to all nations of the earth the inalienable right to be free and independent. This is the moment they have long awaited. This is the bright morning after the long night of their colonial subjection. With heads erect and brows serene, they now stand in the sun even as once, more than 400 years ago. Their forefathers stood as free men beholden to none. For the ancient honor of their nation is redeemed at last, for the rich and unbounded opportunities that freedom offers are now within their grasp. The opportunity to govern themselves and to run their affairs without intervention of any foreign power, the opportunity to develop their natural resources and thus ensure their economic self-sufficiency under the principle of the Philippines for the Filipinos, the opportunity to discover and develop their individual and national potentialities uninhabited by the force of political subjection or by the blight of racial prejudice, the opportunity to rehabilitate themselves in mind and in spirit in accordance with the best that the man has thought and said and done through the ages, the opportunity to find themselves anew, learn the ways they have forgotten, and make themselves into the nation that God and nature intended they should be. The opportunity to establish a sovereign republic dedicated to ideal peace, liberty, and moral justice. The opportunity to contribute their share in the common prosperity of the nations of Greater East Asia and all of mankind. The opportunity to cherish their independence in order that it may endure forever as an inexhaustible fountain of blessings for this and for future generations of their race. The Filipino people, through the Preparatory Commission for the Philippine Independence, invoking the aid of divine providence and the hallowed spirits of Filipino patriots and martyrs who gave their lives for the freedom of their fatherland, hereby proclaim to the world that they are, as of right they ought to be, a free and independent nation, that they no longer owe allegiance to any foreign nation, that henceforth they shall exercise all the powers and enjoy all the privileges to which they are entitled as a free and independent state, and that for the defense of their territorial integrity and the preservation of their independent existence, they pledge their fortune, their lives, and their sacred honor.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, our topic for today is political caricature in Alfred McCoy's Philippine cartoons. Political caricature of the caricature of the American era from 1900s to 1941. So, what is political caricature or cartoon? Political caricature is a modern art form that turned away from classical art by exaggerating human features and prodding fun at its subjects. It is also known as editorial cartoon that contain a commentary that expressed the artist's opinion toward a certain issues. This art became part of the print media as a form of political and social commentary that usually pinpoint the person's power and authority. It is a unique way to present ideas and capture the audience or reader's imaginations. In Alfred McCoy's book, Philippine Cartoons Political Caricature of the American Era from 1900 to 1941, with the help of Alfredo Roses, they compiled some political cartoons that is published in newspaper dailies and periodical in the aforementioned time period. McCoy's and Roses' book shows the transition from the Spanish colonial period to the American occupation period. It is also demonstrated that the different strands of changes and shift in Philippine culture, society, and politics. In this part, we are going to look at selected cartoon or caricature and discuss its content. The example shown presents politician from Tondo. As shown above, it is Dr. Santos passing his crown to his brother-in-law, Dr. Barcelona. As you can see, there is a Filipino guy who is wearing a salakot and barong Tagalog who's trying to stop Santos. My interpretation in this caricature is, let's say that Dr. Santos is a Spaniard and Dr. Barcelona is the American. So Filipino is trying to stop Dr. Santos to give his crown to Dr. Barcelona. Sabihin na nating yung Filipino is trying to stop the colonialization of these two person, ganun. The second example shown above was drawn by Fernando Armazolo and it aimed as a commentary to the workings of Manila police at that area. As you can see, there is a Filipino child who is running because he stole a skinny chicken for he had nothing to eat. The police officers was running after him, then suddenly a man wearing a salakot and barong Tagalog, labeled as Juan de la Cruz, was robbing or stopping the officer. It seems like it was telling him to leave the small-time pickpockets and thieves and to turn at the great thieves instead. He was also pointing at his back, where is a huge warehouse containing bulk of rice, milk, and some groceries products. In this caricature, we can interpret this literally kung ano man yung naka-draw dun sa caricature. So, there are 3 Filipinos in that caricature and the police trying to chase the kid who steal a skinny chicken, and there is also a one person who is trying to pull back the officer to look back and see what's happening there. So parang ang ano lang dito is wag kang mag-focus dun sa mga small time. Bakit hindi ka mag-focus dun sa mas malaki? Kumbaga, sabihin na natin yung nasa loob ng warehouse is mga Americans that is abusing our resources, ganun. Ayun lang. The third example shown was showing an illustration of commentary about the unprecedented cases of colorum automobiles in some city street. This illustration shows fatal accidents involving colorum automobiles such as taxis and jeepneys that occurred too often already. In this caricature, we can see a automobile. There is a sign that it is a colorum vehicle, and there are 3 persons inside of it: the drivers, the passenger, and the one is like the kamatayan. Ganun, si kamatayan ba? Tapos, in that time, we know that only rich people have vehicles, and if you look closely, you can see in the background that there's a man in the top, in the left corner side. There's a look like he is rich because he suit a expensive suit and tie, ganun. And in the upper right side, there's a like a zombie, parang ganun kumpulan. But for me, it is a Filipino. Maybe there are some violations of the human, ba? Ayun, human rights, parang may pagsagasa dun. And syempre, Pilipinos laging naaapi, ganun. So, ayun lang. Salamat.
Figure 4. Cartoon depicts a cinema. The fourth example shown above was revealing a cinema scenario. There is a rigid police officer that was flashed at the screen who was saying that couple are not allowed to make love and do something funny inside the cinema, but it seems the older couple was amused and the younger couple were horrified. Figure 5. Cartoon published by The Independent on November 27, 1915. The fifth example shown above was exemplifying the caricature of Uncle Sam who was riding a chariot that was pulled by a Filipino who is wearing school uniform. As you can see, in the illustration, the Filipino boy who was wearing school uniform is also carrying American objects such as baseball bat, whiskey, and boxing gloves. According to McCoy caption to the said cartoon, stated that this cartoon was based on an event wherein William Howard Taft was conveyed to Manila by riding a chariot who was pulled by Liceo de Manila student in 1907. It was condemned by the National at the time. Figure number 6. Cartoon published by Lipang Kalabaw on August 24, 1907. The last example shown above was showing Uncle Sam rationing porridge to the politician and member of the Progresista Party, also known as Federalista Party, while on the other side was the Nacionalista Party member who were waiting and looked on their turn. This cartoon portrays the patronage of the United States being coveted by politicians from either of the party.
Hello, good day everyone. We will tackle about the revisiting Corazon Aquino's speech before the US Congress. But before that, we must know who is Corazon Aquino. So, who is Corazon Aquino? Her full name is Maria Corazon Coanco Aquino. She was born January 25, 1933 on Tarlac, and she was died on August 1, 2009 on Makati City. She was the first female president of the Philippine politics or government, and she was the leader on restoring the democratic rule in our country after the long dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. So, how did Corazon Aquino become famous? Corazon Aquino became the unified opposition's presidential candidate when Ferdinand Marcos unexpectedly called for presidential elections in February 1986. Aquino's husband, Senador Benigno Simeon Aquino Jr., a prominent opposition politician, had been jailed by Marcos for 8 years and was assassinated in August 1983. This event galvanized opposition to the Marcos government. So, what did Corazon Aquino accomplish? Corazon Aquino appointed a commission to write a new constitution that restored the bicameral Congress that had been abolished by Marcos. It was ratified by a landslide vote. Aquino held elections for the new Congress and broke up the economic monopolies held by Marcos's allies. However, she failed to undertake fundamental economic or social reforms. Let's begin revisiting Corazon Aquino's speech before the U.S. Congress. On September 18, 1986, Cory Aquino went to the United States and spoke before the joint session of the U.S. Congress. Cory Aquino was welcomed with long applause as she took the podium and addressed the United States about her presidency and the challenges faced by the new republic. She then told of Ninoy's character, conviction, and resolve in opposing the dictatorship of Marcos. This was the photo taken on September 18, 1986. The intent of the speech is to declare the freedom of the Filipinos from the Marcos regime, to mark a new beginning for the Filipinos, and to appeal for financial assistance from the United States government. Former President Corazon Aquino's leadership was more than restoring democracy. As most people would think, in leading the People's Power Revolution, she strongly advocated peace and unity among the Filipinos. As she led the nation, she contributed to a worldwide women's movement, becoming a courageous role model for women and women's leadership. Corazon's Aquino redefined what a leader truly is, not all about the man with political experience or official positions or the militaristic knowledge, but a heroic woman can to make the Philippines a country by the people. When former President of the Philippines, Corazon Aquino, gave a speech to the United States Congress on September 1986, she called on America to help our country in maintaining the freedom. Her speech was started and decorated by the accountable references to her husband, which is the former Senator Ninoy Aquino. Her speech was to connect Ninoy's struggle with that of the whole nation, all the while interlinking their family's history with the fate of the entire country. She justified her presence in front of the U.S. Congress using symbolic words to refer her connection to the late Ninoy on one hand and satisfying her command to the Filipino people on the other. She succeeded in her analysis of the martial law era regarding its origin and outcome.
America in grief to bury my husband, Ninoy Aquino. I thought I had left it also to lay to rest his restless dream of Philippine freedom. Today I have returned as the president of a free people. By that brave and selfless act of giving honor, a nation in shame recovered its own. A country that had lost faith in its future found it in a faithless and brazen act of murder. So in giving we receive, in losing we find, and out of defeat we snatched our victory. Today we face the aspiration of a people who had known so much poverty and massive unemployment for the past 14 years, and yet offer their lives for the abstraction of democracy. Wherever I went in the campaign, slum area or impoverished village, they came to me with one cry: democracy. Not food, although they clearly needed it, but democracy. Not work, although they surely wanted it, but democracy. Not money, for they gave what little they had to my campaign. They didn't expect me to work a miracle that would instantly put food into their mouths, clothes on their back, education in their children, and give them work that will put dignity in their lives. But I feel the pressing obligation to respond quickly as the leader of a people so deserving of all.
When she took over the presidency, she was seen not only as a widowed wife, but also as the people's champion and the mother of the Philippine democracy. The relevance of Corazon Aquino's speech in understanding history is that it revealed the Filipino struggle for freedom against the oppressive government of former President Marcos. The speech also recognized the Filipino sacrifices with honor and dignity. It also expressed deep sense of appreciation for today's democracy.